Hola a todos y bienvenidos de nuevo a otro episodio de Cheat Sleep Repito. Mi nombre es Dylan.
Mi nombre es Hayden.
And welcome back to another episode. Hayden, how you doing?
I'm all right, mate. That was a bit random. Where did that come from?
What do you mean?
You started in, I don't know, was that Spanish?
Eh?
Was it? Yeah, you started in Spanish. Did you not realise?
Mate, are you hallucinating? Because you're so ill.
You're bilingual.
Is that what's going on? Are you feeling okay? Oh, if anyone doesn't know, Hayden's feeling a bit poorly this week. What's up, mate? I'm not feeling so good, all right? Anyone who watches the podcast is in for an absolute treat looking at that. Hiya.
Oi, I'm in an hoodie. I'm comfy. I'm cozy. Yeah. I'm here recording the podcast, all right? Leave me alone.
Well, you might be wondering why we're not in the same place. That's why. I don't fancy his lurgy. Hey, did you know what will really help you feel better?
You do fancy me, though.
Do you know what will help you?
Go on.
You have to drink kefir every morning. That gut microbiome.
Again.
Get it going, my friend. I don't know if you've seen, but if you don't start the day off with an ice bath and a bit of kefir, then you are simply not looking after your body.
Is that after going to the gym at 5 a.m?
Yeah, exactly that. And do you know what? I wake up early every morning. I wake up at 4 a.m. That gives me 3 extra hours. If you extrapolate that over a week, that's 7 times 3. That's an extra day. I'm getting an extra day compared to you every single week.
Let's just, for a second, let's just speak about that. Don't you just hate those videos? Honest to God, they are so popular. Every single person ever on Instagram is making videos. I'm like, I get up. I'm in the 2 a.m. club. It's getting earlier and earlier. It's like, oh, you don't sleep anymore.
Sleep. Yeah, go to sleep. Honest to God. Did you know, Hayden, if you save £1 every single day for a year, how much money you'll have at the end? £30,000. It's unbelievable. Just £1 every day.
What? Why are you saying that? That's wrong.
I'm a financial guru. Just save £1. It's easy. Anyone who's complaining about not being able to make it anywhere, £1 a day. Get up. I have an extra day. I've got an extra day every morning that no one else gets, so I get that. And that's how you make gains, Hayden. How you doing? How's your week?
Yeah, really good. Thanks for that advice. That I get the analogy now on how good that advice is. My week's good. Other than the fact that I've got this cold. Don't know if you know, got a cold again. Not feeling so great. Wearing an hoodie. Not feeling good. Didn't sleep very well.
I'm just like, jokes aside for a second. You do have the worst immune system of anyone I've ever met. Like, how is that annoying? Or
I don't know. It's just been a bit rubbish recently, isn't it? I don't know.
Yeah, recently. How long's recently for you?
I didn't get COVID.
Right. You didn't do a test that told you had COVID. That's what you're saying.
I did tests. They came out negative.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Do you know why, everyone? Do you know why? Because Hayden can't put a stick on his tonsils. He physically can't do it. So he did tests
I bet a lot of people.
Yeah, but you did tests and you had not put on your tonsils. You're I've not got it. Did you do the part of the test where it would get the? No, I didn't do that bit. Right.
Yeah, because they went to nose only. They did go to nose only. Those sticks. They were not for your tonsils anymore after months. Okay. So none of that.
All right.
None of that.
Okay. Other than your little cold. Oh, you little cold. How's your week been?
Yeah, it's been all right. We had our 500th mock sats this week.
You're in year 6, right?
Yeah, classic year 6. We just ram them into a smaller time period because they do the sats before the end of the year for some reason. And that was all right, but it's just stressful, isn't it? Marking papers. I always think, no marking. I don't know what is wrong with me. Every time we do a mock test week, right? I always think, that's good because we've got no actual lessons. I'm like, easy week, no marking. I always seem to forget that marking test takes 3 times as long as your actual marking does. But got it done. All good. Bit of progress. Everyone's feeling good. Kids are ready. It's, just one of them weeks.
Do you, what papers didn't you do the 2023 papers, which were renowned for being really, really, really hard and annoying?
Yeah, I'm pretending we're not. No, but the 2023 papers, I really hate them. I do think I'm a classic person who, loads of teachers do this. Every year it's the worst year ever, right? Every year, it's so much harder than previous years. We all do it. And I do think I'm one of those people. But then I try and reflect afterwards and be like, okay, calm down. It's done now. Is it actually, or is it just exactly the same as it is every other year? And having done them a year later,
I was right.
Yeah, well, not completely, but there was just a few bits about it. I just thought the questions weren't particularly well written, particularly in the reading. There was way too many questions to do in the reading. I know you made a video on YouTube last year, didn't you, about all the controversy around all the English, and it's definitely true. It was just poorly written, the paper. Some of the reasoning and the maths was just a bit harsh, just a bit unnecessarily mean. There'll be a 1-mark question with 3 steps, and you'd be like, oh, that's not really happened before. But it's not that bad. The pass mark was lower, which I never actually knew until we did it again this year, because I never actually found out what it was. But it was lower than previous years, so it's fine. It was adjusted to make up for the fact that it was more difficult. Yeah,
I reckon. If you look back at the papers, isn't it something like 2023? I think everyone agrees is tricky. There was a big furore at the time. I think everyone is a bit like, maybe we overreacted slightly when you look at it, because some of them are like, okay, they are a bit tricky, whatever. But isn't it 2023? And is it 2016 that's like renowned for being ridiculously hard?
I don't know if it's 2016 because we never go back that far anymore, but 2018 certainly is.
Right.
The 2018 tests are just savage. We did them with this cohort. It was like the second one we did in the year, and then some of their scores just went down. It was like, that test is absolutely savage. I still think that's the hardest one. I was comparing them because we did that not too long ago, and I was like, nah, 2018 is still nastier than 2023, in my opinion.
Fair enough. Well, down in year 4, we don't have that problem. What are you going to say?
I was going to say we can talk stats a bit more later, because we've got some episodes planned in the future where we might be talking about it. We've got some guests.
Yeah.
We're a returning guest.
Yeah, we're going to try and get people back on the podcast. I've had people message me so often over the last, honestly, 4 months, saying like, "Oh, I'd love to come on at some point," and I'm like, genuinely like, "Yeah, that would be great. That would be fantastic." But do you know what's easier for me? If I roll out of bed, just drive to Hayden's and then record off the.
If you what out of bed? Sorry.
If I roll
sorry. What do you do out of bed? Because I heard roll. I heard roll out of. If I roll out of it, so just for context, everyone, Dylan sent me a voice note to the group chat. So me, him, and our girlfriends, trying to get us to back him up, because his Lauren, his girlfriend, who's called Lauren, both called Lauren, was taking the mick out of him for not pronouncing rolling.
No,
correctly.
I'm not having it. Right, I'm going to say it. I'm going to say the word. Yeah. And then you're going to say the word, and the listeners will tell us if there's any difference whatsoever. You go first, actually. Go on.
Okay. Rolling. That's so different.
There is no difference whatsoever. Honestly.
Right.
Go on.
Okay. When you speak, I think you're about to tell me about what you're doing in a boat. Rowing. Right? Whereas when I'm speaking, I'm thinking about like a sandwich, a roll.
Right.
I'm rolling.
Right. Hey, what do you do with 10 pins with a ball when you chuck it down the alley? What are you doing?
Bowling. No, not bowling. It's not a bow and arrow. You're not firing the bowl like this. I'm going bowling. No, it's bowling. Do you know what? I don't even mind that you say it different. It's just the fact that you think they're the same. You think that there's no difference in what we're saying. No,
I need to explain this. I'm genuinely more than willing to accept that I say it wrong, because there's a lot of things I say wrong, whether it's idioms the wrong way round, or I've got a bit of a northern twang in like the every other word sometimes that I'm saying. I'm willing to accept that, but I truly sit here and don't understand at all the difference between these two words that you're saying. Like when people tell me, I'm like, I even would accept that you're right, but I want you all to understand that in my brain I think I'm going crazy because I don't know the difference whatsoever between these things.
Well, let's keep rolling with the podcast. You'd forget your screw if your head wasn't on.
You can't even do it wrong. You can't
what did you say last time? You'd forget your head if it wasn't attached or something else. You didn't even finish.
You forget your head if you didn't have a vertebrae attaching it to your spine. That's the same.
That's the one, Dylan. Well done. Anyway, how's your week? How have you been?
Yeah, fine. We had our last week of swimming this week. And obviously swimming's amazing, but it kind of messes up your afternoon curriculum a bit, like when it's so intricately planned to cover everything and there's already not enough time to do stuff. And then suddenly it's like, by the way, an afternoon a week for 4 weeks, you're going swimming. And it's like, oh, okay. So we kind of rejig stuff around. But it just so happened in the afternoon where they go swimming, I constantly had like half an hour spare with the kids. After we got and done the register, they got their stuff ready. We just had half an hour until the coach got there. So I was like, what can I do that's quite useful? And I was thinking, well, I don't get time for handwriting. Don't get much time at all in school for handwriting. Mm-hmm. So over the last couple of weeks, we've been printing out some prompts and stuff, some help with lines. And we had a real focus in my class about, it's as simple as this, the height of your letters and the fact that I need to be able to read them. And it's become a running joke. And it is funny, but it's also true. And I explained to the kids, and me and you talked about this before, I love doing this, when you actually just stop and before you do something with the children, you simply just explain why you're doing this. So instead of just being like, right, handwriting, here's what an H looks like. Can you copy that 10 times? Then we'll do an I. Actually saying to them, it's like, why do you think that we practice handwriting in school? Like, what is the point? And it was amazing. It was such a good thing to do, such a simple process with the kids, because the first 6 answers were complete nonsense, genuinely. It took a good 3 minutes to get to the actual reason. And it made me think, God, they don't know half the time. They just think that, their teacher's just getting them to write an H. Well, that's cool. And there's no application then to their work. So we had a chat, classic. And they were like, because on the board, it's that tall. And I was like, true, but that's not the reason why we practice handwriting, is it? And then the next person said, because we do writing in our book. And I was like, I get what you mean, but again, that's not why we're doing it. It's not an actual reason. And we ended up getting to the point where one child said, is it so that you can read it properly? And I was like, yes, it is as simple as that. We practice handwriting, so anyone who picks up your work who isn't used to your writing can still read it. Because I'll be very honest, guys, when I read your work, I know for a fact there are other teachers in the school who wouldn't know what you're putting down, but I do because I'm used to seeing what your letters are like. So anyway, we do this for a couple of weeks, and I just had one of them moments again as a teacher that we talked about recently, where those small wins where you're just like, oh yeah, okay, this is progress, and this is why we do this. Because one of the children, and this was in an English lesson, so we've been doing handwriting, and it was English lesson. And I was just talking, we set them off on a task, and I just said to them, I pointed to the board where I've got a little like double line where I tell them how high their letters should go, because either their letters go to roughly halfway or to the top. You know what it's like teaching kids. It's tiny. Sometimes it's really small. They just squeeze it in. And this kid just halfway through their writing task put their hand up. And I was like, yeah. And I was expecting him to say, how do you spell this word? Or does this make sense? Or can you check my work? As I always do. And he just said, oh, I've noticed my handwriting is much better now. I'm getting to halfway. And I was like, oh, amazing, brilliant. This is why we're doing it. And if you look at the handwriting across the board, it is improving. And I think sometimes we get caught up as teachers when people introduce stuff, or when you're just doing stuff for run of the mill. Okay, yeah, whatever. And you notice that it's not really shifting the dial much. Actually, you can shift the dial with these children if you're really specific about what you're doing. If you have small goals, is what I think, small steps with the kids. The only thing my class have been focusing on in terms of their handwriting for about 4 weeks now is the height of their letters. If it's slightly scruffy, if it wasn't joined up properly, if the gaps between the words were inconsistent, I did not have a problem with what they were doing. No, all I was really laser focused on was the height of their letters, and it really made a difference in such a short piece of time. I don't know, it's one of the things I wanted to share with you, that it does work if you have that laser focus.
Yeah, and and the other side of it, the whole point, I guess, is that the handwriting and time for handwriting is just pushed out of the curriculum, isn't it? I'd wonder how many schools actually have proper time put aside to do things like handwriting, because I reckon that is the first thing to go as soon as it's, no, we're not teaching enough science, boom, handwriting time's gone. And then we go, oh, why is the handwriting so bad in year 6? It's like, well, they've not actually had any actual teaching like that, like specific focuses where they can really make improvements for ages. Do you think there's any other areas of the curriculum like that? Like handwriting, where it's like just completely disregarded now and never gets put in, really?
Yeah, I would say foundational maths, and that sounds ridiculous, but I'm talking very specific math skills that aren't explicitly written into the curriculum, where if a child gets to year 3, right, and they can't really double a number or halve a number, or those kind of foundational skills that, how to add 39, right? To explicitly give time to show children that most adults, if they add 39, just add 40 and take away 1. I know it's built in there at points, but it might just be like a standalone lesson. There's a lot of stuff like that where it kind of just gets swept under the rug because they've got to learn a procedure. There's not enough time to do it.
Yeah, there's the curriculum to do, and it's like, this is an underpinning skill. It's not an actual learning objective on the curriculum. So, let's hope some of you pick it up. But because really, it should be like, no, we need to teach them all.
Yeah, if you think about doubling, you can use short multiplication and just times by 2. And that's what most kids would do in my class. Where actually the mental arithmetic of learning how to double a number in your head is actually really, really useful in life. And I remember when we were in school, and I'd bring these back. I don't know if they still go on or not. We were in school, we'd sit down and the teacher would put Mr. Letts, I remember in year 6, he'd get a little tape. It would go into a tape recorder, push it in. I remember the click, and he'd press play. And it would be this voice, and it would say, you'd do a maths test where it's 30 questions. There was no repeating, and they moved on to the next question after like 6 to 10 seconds. And it was questions like that. It was 9 add 7, and you had like 6 seconds to do it.
And every 5 questions it would be harder, right?
Exactly. And by the end, you'd get a bunch of children who, okay, you guys, you stop at 20. I remember there was a table. They just stopped there, and they'd be like, right, okay, brilliant. We'll finish it off. Everyone else could carry on for a minute. They'd be doing something else. Yeah. But I thought that was really good. I thought that's fantastic practice. And now, when was the last time in real life you did maths and you needed a pen and paper to do the maths?
So outside of teaching?
Just, in real life, like as an adult, coping in this world.
Oh, no, never really. Very, very, very rarely. I can't and think of an example.
How often do you do maths in your head?
All the time. I love maths.
Yeah, exactly. I just do it for fun. Yeah. But every time you go shopping, you're kind of keeping an eye on how much you're spending. You're thinking, okay, well, that's a £5 for 6 rolls, but this is a £10 for 12 rolls. Is that the same? Is that different? You're like, well, I might as well get the big one.
And time, like constantly doing maths with time, especially now we've got the kids. Always thinking about time for this. How long they're going for a walk? How long we go for a nap? How long until they're going to be tired again? All that sort of stuff. And
let's ask you right now then, in your Year 6 class, how many children can do long division, perfectly divide by 43? How many children can tell the duration of time between 2 points?
I reckon more people can do long division than tell the time, which is like a Year 3 skill. Yeah, telling the time is embarrassing. I'm still shocked when Year 6 kids ask me, what's the time? And I go, well, it's there. The clock's there. The clock's been there all year. It's still there. Oh, I can't read it. So what do you mean? What? Obviously I wouldn't be like, what, you buffoon? Yeah. But I am in my head. I'm like, Jesus Christ! No one can tell the time anymore. And you're right. That is one of those foundational skills that time is in the curriculum, and we talked about how. Yep. We think maybe there's a bit of a parent expectation maybe to help your kids learn how to tell the time, because that's just a part of life. But yeah, definitely foundational skills. I actually think to an extent reading as well. I reckon if we look at reading, as in kids just reading a book in school time now compared to when we were at school, that time has drastically gone, isn't it? I remember being at school and regularly in the week we'd have like a whole 40-minute slot where it was like, cool, everyone go and get your favorite reading book and go and sit somewhere really nice and just read. We had a little library at school and we just go there all the time. And it was really put together. It was lovely. It was a nice area to be in. And we just go and sit on some beanbags and I'd just read a book for 40 minutes. And I was like, oh, lunchtime now. Brill. We all got good reading skills though. We were great readers.
But I loved it when the teacher, end of every day, we'd read part of our book. And that's a big thing that still happens in schools. It's a big thing Ofsted push, and they say that should be happening. But I always find it fantastic when Ofsted tell me as a teacher what I should be doing with my day in a day where it's absolutely crammed already with the expectations they've already set. And I'm like, shut up. If you gave me full autonomy over my day, I tell you what, we'd be doing reading more than anything. I tell you that now, every single day of the week. But I can't, and that's because of you, Ofsted. So please don't turn around then and tell me, oh, it's beneficial if the children read for 20 minutes end of the day a class book. I know it is.
Is it?
Yeah. Yeah, honestly, you're in control of the reason why it doesn't happen.
Thanks, Mr. Ofsted person, or leader of education that probably has no actual education in teaching education. We've gone to university. We know that reading's important because we got told it for 3 years. We know that's important. Why are you telling us that? Here's 12 hours of stuff to do in a day. It's like, what? We haven't got 12 hours. Well, do it.
I know, it's mental. And when you think about, I know we're maths leads, so any maths leads listening as well, this might be controversial. And but it's what it is. I deliver maths, we deliver maths in our school to the absolute top standard based on what we're expected to do via the curriculum, and our kids get everything they need. And we had a recent Ofsted visit and we know it's good. However, my personal opinion is there is a huge chunk of the curriculum, especially in upper key stage 2, year 5 and 6, which is absolutely not necessary for children who are 10 to learn. Absolutely not. And if we really break it down, okay, who actually cares if a 10-year-old can cross multiply 2 fractions? Truly, who cares? Because if you carry on with, which you all will, if you carry on maths into secondary school, you can do that later if you want to do that for whatever reason. And we can talk about how, it might be used in certain situations or not. But do you know what, at the end of the day, if as a primary school teacher, my kids get halfway through year 6 and they can't tell an analog clock, I would love to have the freedom to be able to completely drop that part of the fractions section and do time and do a week exploring time with them. Because do you know what? I know that's more important for them and it winds me up.
It's a good point. There's a layer of irony, because I was about to say there's no priorities, right? It's just do the whole curriculum. But then priorities do emerge in Upper Key Stage 2, not for the right reason.
Yeah.
But, the priorities should be what you just said. It should be what are the most important life skills? Let's make sure they're honed in on first. And at the bottom of the pile, we'll do ratio. We'll do a bit of algebra. They can do that later. They don't need to do that now. They can do that in year 7. Multiplying fractions. But what really happens is, what has the most marks in the SATs? That's the most important thing now. Every teacher is conditioned to think, well, actually, we need to teach them these certain things of arithmetic, because that comes up the most. Algebra, there's only ever 1 or 2 marks a year. We won't do that this year. Time, there's only ever 1 or 2 marks that you might get. If you're unlucky, there'll be a duration problem question in one of the papers. We won't do that. So hang on, that's like the most important life skill. Nah, but it's only 1 mark. Whereas fractions of amounts, there's like 5 or 6 questions on that, and just fractions in general. So we'll do that. We'll do lots of that. And it's like, the priorities are kind of all wrong if we're thinking about the purpose of school being to set kids up for their future and like generally just being able to do life. The SATs don't really correspond with that, but we will talk about that. I know we're going to have a proper conversation about SATs in a future episode. So if you're into that sort of stuff and you want to hear a bit more about SATs, we're going to get a really awesome guest on. I won't say it right now. And we're going to talk a little bit more about SATs and other struggles of school.
Amazing. Right, guys, let's that's a lovely intro. We kind of went off piece there, but I like those conversations, and hopefully you listeners do as well. Guys, quick one from me. Hayden's feeling poorly. Okay, It's Sunday. We've left it quite late to this podcast, so you're getting one. That's the good news. You're getting a podcast. The bad news is Hayden's going to have to ad-lib the little intro now, because we're not going to edit this. We're just going to put it out as it is. So let's go to a little intro skit. Hayden, over to you.
Oh, I did the jingle.
Yeah, the jingle. I couldn't think of the word.
Okay,
you did the
ready?
jingle.
Okay. Welcome back to Teach Sleep Repeat. No, I'm doing it, mate. You said I'm doing
it.
You've ruined my bit, and now I can't edit that out. I'm fed up of this.
I'm
sorry, Dylan. I'm stopping you. They're all going to get to see what happens behind the scenes. I normally edit this out. I'm having one of my panic attacks. All right? I'm fed up of you interrupting me.
I'm so sorry. Hayden, please, would you please, I'm sorry, Overlord, sir. Now that we know, can you please edit this part out so that no one knows that the real dynamic between us is that you are absolutely in charge of me and intimidating me every turn.
And I get you to pretend to be the boss.
Yeah.
I will. I'll edit it out. All right? You got one more warning or you're out.
Am I going to be the boss when I come back?
1 minute silence. Imagine, just make everyone sit there for 1 minute. Complete silence.
We're making them sit through this.
Yeah. Anyway, moving on. So, go on, Dil.
Oh, I can go. Thank you.
Yeah.
So
my skit's over.
We had a little Instagram poll. A quick dibs for our Instagram. We don't have a sponsor on this podcast, so I always say this. Our sponsor is ourselves. No. Our sponsor is ourselves.
Is it?
Okay. Yeah. Simple as that.
I thought, never mind. I thought it was someone else.
We're not mentioning it. No. He's got a lot of free airtime. If anyone wants to go back to previous ones,
who has?
He's very grateful for it, by the way. You know who you are. Anyway, we don't have a sponsor on this podcast. So can you go and follow us on Instagram at Teach Sleep Repeat Podcast? I post memes. I post funnies. I post stories where you can do a poll, and it links in exactly to this episode today. So we're going to talk all about setting.
Sorry, 1 second. Hello, James. No, he's not. Cancel the payment. He's not mentioned need financial planning in this episode. Don't worry about it, mate. No, I'll speak to you soon. Sorry, Dil. We'll edit that bit out. Carry on.
It's weird. This episode where we're not editing, there's way more edits than ever. So anyway, this episode, we're talking all about setting. Now, this is a hot topic. I would say it was a hot topic about 8 years ago. It feels like, in general, the professionals kind of agreed where this should go. But it's almost like a silent agreement about setting in schools based on ability. Now, in secondary school, it is highly, highly, highly likely, if you walk into one, that they are being set based on ability. And I think the older children get, the more we kind of accept that, where whatever routes they're taking through their education, there is a need to set to keep them going through education until 16, 17, 18, and it being suitable for them. However, in primary school, I'd say about 8 to 10 years ago, probably when we were starting our teaching, to be fair, there was a huge shift in the narrative as to whether or not we should be setting children in primary school based on their ability. Now, Hayden, before we get into all of the research and have our debate, I did a quick Instagram poll to our listeners asking them, do they set? Okay. And there were 4 options. I asked them, if you work in a primary school, so this is all primary school, do you set for maths and English? Do you set just for maths? Do you set just for English? Or do you not set at all? What I want you to do, Hayden, is just reason and justify what you think the national outlook is based on our little poll. So what would you go for? What would you say is the outcome?
Guessing the percentages sort of thing.
Yeah, what do you think the real outlook is when we look at it now? Not what we think.
I reckon more than 50% have said yes for maths. I reckon that's the highest one, personally. And I reckon a lot of people still set for English, but I think it's lower. I reckon it's lower than 50%. That's kind of where I'm going to go. That probably encompasses everything.
And what about people who don't set at all?
I think less than 50. I reckon 40 to 50%.
Okay, these do have to add up to 100, Hayden.
Wait. Oh yeah, because they're only voting for one, aren't they?
Yeah. So either you can't set for maths and English and set for neither maths or English. So you've got to just choose one. I'm going to tell you one more time because obviously that worked out nicely.
No, I think it still works. I said less than 50. It could be 10. I think more. Okay. I think 50 to 60%. 50 to 60. I reckon set just for maths.
Okay, and how much set not at all?
And not at all. I reckon 30%.
Okay, and what about just English?
Ones. Just English. Whatever the rest is, divided between the two.
Okay.
They're the ones I'm really thinking about.
Thank you for your fantastic input, Hayden. Here are the options. Does your school set based on ability? 56% do not set at all.
Ah, that's more than I thought.
22% set just for maths. 19% set for maths and for English. And only 3% set just for English.
That's interesting. So it tends to be then, based on that poll, that you either set or you don't. It's kind of like you set for everything or not.
Yeah. Well, just for maths was the second. So they don't set for English.
Yeah, but that was quite close, wasn't it? It was quite close to
set
for
both. 56. I'd say set here. 78% of people don't set for English. That's what the results of this is. And the results for this as well is for in terms of maths is 58% don't set for maths. So it's much more likely that people set for maths.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So what do you think about that? What are your initial thoughts, Hayden? Because I've worked in settings where I've done all of the different ways you could possibly do stuff. I've worked where you set for maths. I've worked in higher ability maths, lower ability maths. I've worked in mixed ability maths. I've worked in set English, low ability English, high ability English, and I've worked in mixed. So there's not one I haven't done. So I'm going to take a step back here. What's your opinion on the question, should we set from ability when it comes to maths and English in a primary school?
I'm going to separate it just for a minute to maths for a sec, and because I do think maths and English are very different, and we'll get onto that as to why. But just going back in time a bit, when we started our careers, and obviously, like you said, it was quite a hot topic, and it definitely was back then, because I think it was very common to set, and people were starting to be like, hey, actually, we shouldn't do this, and there was loads of research. And I remember being really, really pro all of the research, what it was saying, as in not setting. And I remember being the maths lead in the school we worked in at the time, and I was very keen to try and adhere to this sort of guidance and be like, no, actually, let's stop, because we had like 6-way sets. Do you remember in that? It was a big school. And I was like, no, this is what the research says. So I was very pro mixed ability, but over the years, through experience, I have completely flipped the other way. Not completely. There's a bit of a middle ground, but I'm way more pro setting now than I am mixed ability in maths, and not quite the same in English. And do you want me to dive into the reasons now, or do we want to save that?
No, it's interesting, because let's just for 1 second think about it, because I think where I'm going to play this now, I'm going to play it from the other role of really adhering to the research, because I think it's important as educators to do both. I think it's really important as educators to read and keep up with research and understand that it's gone for a scientific method. You can't actually, if it's based on a lot of research that's done well, it's hard to argue against research. However, I do believe that it's a very unique job in that, you live it and breathe it every single day. So you're going to form your own opinion as well. So I think it's important to do both. Maybe I'll lean more towards the objective and you can lean more towards the experience.
Sure.
So you said there's a difference between when it comes to maths and English. So I really want you to set out that stall a little bit, and then we can maybe talk about, why you think it's beneficial in those contexts.
Sure.
So I assume what you're saying, you think it's more beneficial in maths, or it's more suited to maths. What's your opinion there?
I think it is more beneficial in maths to set by ability. I think generally, I'll go into why, but with a bit of pretense of what I think the research is. Now, I haven't actually seen the research in many years, so I am very much just going off of what I think it will say, and you might be able to enlighten me with.
Yeah, I've had a quick look, so I've got the overarching results of most of the research here, so I can sprinkle it in as we go.
So, in my understanding, the general research back when I was looking into it was that setting was worse for the children because of the how it affected them mentally, right? Children aren't stupid enough to not know what set they're in. They very quickly will work out, oh, I'm in the bottom set maths. That means I'm rubbish at maths, and therefore I'm not really going to bother with it because I think I'm terrible. And that to me was kind of the underpinning idea of the research, which was that let's stop doing that to kids because we're putting a ceiling on them straight away. We're telling them they're in the bottom set. They're never actually going to achieve more than that because we're already telling them they're in that box. And I was like, yeah, definitely. But then through experience, I think maths is so nuanced, like with, even just talking about the foundational stuff we were talking about earlier, right? Kids that can double and kids that can't. Kids that can read the time, kids that can't. I think maths is so underpinned by this massive variety of skills that totally sets kids apart in terms of their ability to reason and problem solve with the arithmetic skills they may or may not have. That I think in a mixed ability class, I think the average teacher is not able, in a class of 32 completely mixed kids, to meet the needs of those children sufficiently enough. I think they'll meet the needs of a group of children in that class, but I think that will often either skim off the top ability children who will absolutely not be getting a sufficient level of planning and teaching and lessons and tasks, or it'll be the other end, it'll be the lowest children. I think is quite common.
Okay, so I'm going to come in with basically a part of the research here. The overwhelming results of the research, it'll be interesting to come off the back of what you've just said, is that when it comes to setting, okay, when you look at the outcomes, firstly, it's a marginal difference in attainment. So, this difference is small. It's not substantial. It's not moderate. It is marginal. So, it has a marginal difference on attainment. But this is the way it goes. If you're a higher ability child working in a mixed setting, is slightly worse for your attainment. So when you set, the higher ability children tend to do better.
Yeah.
When you set for lower ability children, in mixed ability, it tends to be better for them. So when you set, it tends to have a marginal negative impact on your lowest children. It widens the gap when you set, and that is the huge argument against doing it. How would you reply to that if someone said, look, this is the research, whether it's marginal or not, it seems like, okay, you seem to think that we could avoid the social stigma, and we'll talk about that in a second, but let's focus on the attainment. How would you come back to someone who says, well, look, the research says it widens the attainment gap? That's bad.
Okay, so I've got two things to say about this then. So firstly, I don't disagree with the research. I think that's obviously who am I to be like, nope, that's wrong. They happened to research the wrong group of children. No, of course, that's clearly happening. And I think it actually makes sense that obviously if you have a mixed ability class, it just squashes the ends in because we're not superhuman. So my first point is about that in terms of, I think when it comes to educational research, generally I agree with it, but sometimes there's a lot of idealism, which it's like the whole Instagram versus reality situation for me. I do think sometimes it's cool, that's great research, but it does kind of rely on teachers doing an unholy amount of work to be able to attain that. Now, if you're lucky enough to be in a bigger school, you might be able to share out that planning. But if you're in, let's say, a 1 form or a 2 form, and it's suddenly okay, you've got 6 sort of levels of differentiation you need to consider in this class because you just happen to, it's potluck, you just happen to have children that are working way below the key stage. You've got children that are sort of working towards, children that are kind of nearing expected, you've got children expected, children solid expected, and you've just got to teach a lesson to them because mixed ability is better, so off you go. It's well, for that to be a good standard, in my opinion, would require a hell of a lot of work and understanding to be able to do so. And I don't think it's realistic to be able to maintain that level of work. So
why is that different in sets? Yeah, why is that different in sets? Let's carry on there. Why do you find that's with setting, then that's not a problem?
So in sets, you've that huge scope of children going from your maybe a 2 years behind the curriculum to someone that's working at really high grades depth is now squished into, okay, you've actually just got the children now that are floating around expected. The difference between the lowest ability and the highest ability child in your class is much closer. So you can really hone in on a lesson that will cater to them all much more probably cater to them all than it would do.
Can I dive in a bit more to that? So with maths, this is something I found in the past because I teach at the minute in terms of a bit mixed. We teach in a settings system, and I think that has lots of pros. But one thing for sure I found is that you are kind of leaning into that shoehorning effect of like what you've just said there in terms of, okay, well, we've set now. So I've got this group of children and they're kind of in this slice of the ability spectrum. And that means I'm going to now plan my fraction unit and I know they're within this splice. And wait a minute, it just so happens that these exact same children are in this exact same splice when it comes to the four operations. And how strange when it's time as well. And I think with maths, obviously English, but in general, it's actually, that's not how it really works, is it? Even when you set, from strand to strand, you're going to have huge variances in A, who in your set can do certain things, and B, the breadth of that. So do you not think we kind of face those problems anyway when it comes to setting?
Well, not massively, because I think, let's just take your analogy there of, and it's quite a common thing, isn't it, that children could be really able in shape and space, but actually not so much in the four operations. And we often set children based on their arithmetic understanding, right? So it's a bit like, oh, that's unfair, because some of those children in that greater depth set actually aren't as good at shape and space as those children you just put in that lower set. But I don't necessarily think that's a massive problem, because I think if they're in a set, the point is a good teacher will be reacting to their needs anyway. So who cares if the lower set, as we call, as someone might call them, who cares if they're doing shape and space lessons at the same level as the other group? They don't have to just do lower stuff because they're lower. That's when it goes wrong, I think. That's when I think it's bad, which is that the ceiling is put on from day one of, nope, those children are low ability, so don't even give them the chance now in any area of maths to excel. It's like, no, you still have to adapt to them. It's just that you might find in some areas they're really weak and you have to go right back for that set. And luckily you can now just hone in on that skill because you've got no one in your set that is actually working higher than that level. But then when it comes to shape, or just geometry in general, actually they're just working at curriculum standard, and as a teacher you need to be able to adapt your lessons to realise that they're working at that level.
So do you think that adapting to your children in that way, you're just making your life harder by going into sets? Because if you're in mixed ability, you're going to plan for that anyway. So what you're essentially saying is you should plan for them to not have a ceiling and be able to do anything, because we don't want to put a ceiling on them, but also we put them into sets. So why not just have them in mixed ability and then take that ceiling off anyway?
Just because I think it is just more to do. I think if you had that same analogy with the shape and space, if you had a mixed ability class, and again, same thing with the arithmetic, there are going to be lessons where perhaps your children need, maybe 5 or 6 of your children in your class need to be working at a considerably lower level than others, and they need your attention. And it's way harder to sets. But they're all much closer together, so you can take the whole class on that journey without worrying about the tops.
Yeah, I suppose what I'm saying is sometimes the tops in that lower set that you've predetermined are just like you just said, they are at the level of the greater depth group. So it's the same breadth as the mixed ability. You've still got to do the same amount of planning.
You're absolutely right. It's just way less likely, in my opinion. It's just more manageable. That's all it is. I'm not saying it doesn't happen anymore. I'm just saying that going from a scope this big every day to a scope this big every day, with maybe the odd objective where one of your kids goes, "Oh, you're actually at that level. I need need to have a few things in the bag ready to give you." I just think it's more manageable. That's all, and I think you can get better outcomes. But going back to your original question, because there was an overarching point that I was trying to get to, which is that the research is really interesting. Because you said it kind of squashes the tops in, and they don't make as much progress, the higher ability children. But equally, it hinders it brings up the lower ability children being in a mixed ability set. And I imagine that's what I make, by the way. That's what I mean, by the way, when I'm making these arguments to you now is, we will help shift those children up more if they're with the other group. Like I'm looking at the lower end here. Yeah, so that is kind of what I'm hinting at. Yeah. So my actual, at the start of this conversation, I said I'm not completely in favour of setting, because I've kind of, in my opinion, found a bit of a middle ground. And I think you have too, because we've sort of applied this process at our school a bit. And my opinion is that those really high ability children, I actually think it's beneficial for them to come out and go and work at a higher, faster pace, working on harder stuff, and providing with that progress that they make that they're now missing from being in a mixed ability set. But what I don't think we should do is do the same thing to the lowest children, because I think it's inverted in terms of the psychological effect it has on children. The point is, with the lower ability children, finding out you're rubbish at something is really bad, and then you don't want to do it and you make less progress. Finding out you're great at something for you on a personal level doesn't make you then like worse at that thing. Like I think that's okay. But with the lower ability children, it's like, I think as much as possible, we should be mixing like 66% of the cohort. I think if your top third going out, or even, what it depends on your cohort size, to be fair. You could have like 300 kids in a year group. Obviously, that doesn't happen. But in that case, you might only take out the top 5% because you've got a much bigger cohort. But yeah, I think as where possible, we should be utilizing the benefits of mixed ability on their mindset, but trying to be rooted in reality a bit more, in that it is just unmanageable to plan really top tier lessons to a massive scope of children. Let's just half that scope a bit by taking the kind of expected and lower ability children, put them together.
Okay. In that case, then let's like flip the thing to English, because we kind of having a maths mindset for now. And sure. I'm going to kind of back you up here. I want you to extrapolate on this, because it is, I don't think anyone, unless you've experienced trying to do it, teaching mixed ability English with a group of children who cannot read in your class and a group of children who are reading the works of Jane Eyre and they're like 10, that is, to me, crazy. And I still have never heard anyone really properly explain, because you're exactly right. We've had spelling training lately. We've had loads of training in the past. Anyone who's a teacher, works in education, will have training sometimes, and you'll think, that sounds great on paper, but can you answer my 4 questions about how in this exact situation, which I'm in right now of my class, how this would remotely help? And they honestly never really have an answer. So my big question with whole class reading, for example, I think it's a fantastic approach. It's something I would absolutely say to schools they should implement when it comes to English, and it should be mixed ability. And again, on paper, it's brilliant, and I'm the advocate for that, right? But then I think to myself, okay, well, what is the answer then to the 4 kids who can't decode and write their own name yet? Like, how on earth are they going to follow along with Michael Morpurgo book? So where do you sit when it comes to like English with reading?
I think there's still a lot of what I said about maths. I think it's still applicable in a way. I just think with English in general, it's easier to have passive outcomes. I think it's easier to teach a mixed ability class with, like, in reality, without having to plan basically a bunch of different objectives, which might actually end up happening sometimes in maths, because they're so far apart that you can't even do the objective without the 3 things that come before it. Whereas with English, think about writing. I think you can generally give any group of children the same task, and the differentiation is by outcome. I'm just not expecting as much from those children, and that's okay. You can hone in on certain skills. It's easier in a English class, I think, to hone in on a range of skills and just not expect some children to be working at the level that other children are. And I think that's okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, go on. You're going to say something?
No, it's fine. I'm just trying to get to the bottom of what we're thinking here, because I suppose, okay, so in general, we've talked about idealism versus realism, and this idea that, obviously, I completely agree with you in terms of there's got to be some malleability here. And I don't think that we can safely say that for every single group of children in the whole country, that one way is going to be better than another. No. I just don't think, I don't think we can do that. So, okay, let's just say then we're accepting now that setting in certain environments is the right thing to do. Okay. And in other environments, it's not. Well, I think we can both agree with that. We can say sometimes it's the right decision to set, sometimes it's not. And, a slippery slope, and a big thing from the research, again, from about a decade ago now, a big part of the argument was, okay, so you want to set. Okay, fine. We've got this research saying it's bad. It doesn't really affect attainment, and it squashes up, and it doesn't really help the lower ability children much. And that's what we want to try and protect in terms of, mental health and all that kind of stuff. Okay, we accept all of that. We can negate that through good teaching, positive outcomes, blah, blah, blah. All right, but how are you going to set? How are you going to make this decision that this child should be in this category? What are you going to use to inform that? As a teacher, are you just going to teach them and say, oh, by the way, these kids should be doing this? Are you going to use a test? Are you going to use a standardized measure? Because the big part from the research, again, was even those who do set, it's very arbitrary. It's a misinformed and subjective way of doing it in the first place, because, it's down to each individual school. And how many times have you taught a set and you thought, this child should be in a different set, when really it's your gut instinct saying that, really. So where do you stand with that?
I guess 2 points again, like with that exact example. I think firstly, if you are going to be setting in a school, it has to be fluid. It's got to be fluid. You can't if we're already accepting we're putting a bit of a ceiling on the children by doing sets, if we're all agreeing that the research isn't wrong, you are kind of doing that whether you think you are or not. At least it needs to be fluid. Like if a child is working at higher or lower level, they need to be able to go to a different set and get the right thing for their needs. Otherwise, it's just pointless. You've broken the system. It's mixed ability again because you've got one kid in your class that shouldn't be there. I've forgotten your original question.
No, my point was how would you go about that then in a world where we're both kind of saying, aren't we? Okay, well, yeah, of course we're going to set sometimes. I think if you're going to be the person or the people in this case who are essentially going against the research, which we are, you've got to really back it up. I think so. How would you go about deciding whether it should be set, B, whether you should set across the school in a certain way, C, what are you actually going to go off? Are you going to go off the opinion of a teacher, or are you going to go off empirical data? And how are you going to make sure that empirical data is worth going off?
I think the opinion of a teacher is something that has been long forgotten and long thrown in the bin of like, it's not useful because sort of SATs came in and said, actually we don't really care about teacher assessment anymore. We're just going to use this data to inform everything. I think the opinion of a teacher is the most valid thing, in my opinion. I think if you've been working with a group of children and you notice that one of their needs isn't being met and you're struggling to meet their needs, but you happen to know that there's another set that exists that will meet their needs perfectly, I think your opinion on that, regardless of whether they've done a test or not, should be the most important thing. But I do think tests are a very, very good way of either backing up what you said or trying to initially find something. For example, if you at the start of the year when you don't know the children at all, I think it's wise to a starting point to maybe use the end of year data from the previous year. I think that's a good starting point. And then as you start to learn the children, a bit of fluidity, children change anyway. You can start moving them around a bit. But I think teacher opinion is probably the most important thing. We're professionals. We work with these kids all day. We know who they are. We know what they're like. We know their learning needs and capabilities very, very well, or as accurately as we can do. That's my opinion.
Okay, so Hayden, give us an insight then for anyone listening, because as most of you probably know, we lead maths. We've led maths in, I've led maths in this school. Hayden's led maths in a number of schools now. We have a system that we've kind of come to, which we think is the best of all worlds. And like you said, of course, we're fluid and we're responsive and things like that. But just set out then, Hayden, how you, in an ideal world, which is essentially what we do, how would you go about setting then in a system where, let's say it's a junior school, they come to you guys in year 3. We're in that situation, like you've said, where we don't really we have some data, but it's not something we can talk to. We don't have the opinion of a teacher anymore. Or let me talk about year 4, year 5, year 6. A bunch of people messaged me on Instagram and said they set, but only in year 6. And they talked about that kind of idea, which is very common, I think, of just setting in year 6.
We set because we know it improves outcomes, so we just do it in the year that it matters.
Well, why are you setting in year 6? It's for the SATs. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah. So is that because they do better in the SATs when you set, or why would we wait until the end of the school year to then set them when we know it's detrimental? We obviously wouldn't do that. So Hayden, how would you go about setting children in a school setting? What would you do?
Sure. So let's assume that at the start of your school, whatever it is, if you're junior school, primary school, let's say you have no data on the children. Mixed ability straight away. You start in mixed ability. Who are we to guess based on nothing, right? Put them in mixed ability classes for an X amount of time, however long you think is appropriate, a few months, a few terms, whatever. Once you've got a bit of empirical data and you've learned to know the children, I think at that point you can start thinking, if you're going to set, this is when you can start looking at the data and talking to the teachers that teach them to decide on an individual basis for every single child. It's not just everyone that got more than 20% goes here. No. It's every single child is an individual. We can't think of them as data points. We're not the government. And put them into a group that you think is going to be most beneficial for their learning. Secondly, culture. I think it's so important. If the research is saying it negatively impacts their mindset, right? Because they know what set they're in. I think it is the school's responsibility to do everything they possibly can to not make that a thing. You can't get rid of it completely because kids aren't stupid. They're going to work out if they're in a higher or lower set by talking to their mates. But you can at least not call it the low set and the greater depth set. Stuff like that. Set 1, 2, and 3. Stupid arbitrary things where it's like any kid is obviously going to work out what that means. At least try to remove that sort of stuff. So culture is really, really important. Once you've got your sets, they have to be fluid. And I think you go in with the approach of, if we, in an ideal world, will have mixed ability. So let's start with that viewpoint. but based on the kids' needs, we'll make sets according to that. So in our school, we don't have, like a lot of schools actually just have a system where it's like, oh yeah, every year we have 6 sets and the kids just get divided into those sets. Like the sets pre-exist the children. Whereas in our school, we have a different approach, and I really like our approach, which is that the sets don't exist. Every year is a completely fresh slate. We just have a cohort of, let's say, just round it up to 100 children, and we talk to the teachers and we look at the data that we have on them, and we go, what would be the best for their learning needs? We're balancing out learning needs with budget for a start. It's like, cool, let's have them in 17 sets. I'm sure that'd be great, but we don't have 17 teachers. So we're thinking about budget, what's realistic, what can we actually do? Equally, we're still thinking about the kids' mindset, I think, and their mental health of, if we're going to do this, let's not just take out 3 children and put them in a set where you just make them feel terrible. So if we can avoid doing a set like that, we will. And if it's really necessary, like in our school, a couple of times, every couple of years, we just happen to have a cohort of children where maybe there's just a bunch of the children in that year group that are just severely behind others. And it's just unreasonable to put them in a mixed ability class because it's going to be extremely hard to plan for them to make a really good progress. And I also think something that the research probably misses out, I don't know, you could correct me on this one, but I reckon it misses it out because it's inconvenient, is there any negative side effects to children's mentality when they're in a mixed ability set and they're clearly the lowest in the class? Like, because I find that interesting. Point. Imagine being sat there and you say, oh, everyone else is doing this task. You get given that differentiated thing every
twinkle
single
sheet.
Time. Yeah, like and it's a whole other conversation we'll come to in a minute about differentiated sheets and things.
Yeah.
I reckon there's, I don't think it's perfect. I don't think being in a mixed ability, suddenly all the kids are like, oh no, we're all the same. It's like, no, they'll still work out that everyone else is doing that hard task and you can't write your name properly. They're not going to know.
Well, here's the thing. We'll move on to differentiation now, though, because it's such a good point. I'm going to start off by saying something I've always thought, because I've played almost devil's advocate during this episode a little bit, because I think the way we do things is a really good way of doing it. And I think being reactive to the children is the number one thing. However, it really makes me laugh when people are like vehemently like, yeah, we must do mixed ability because of this and this. And I'm like, okay, it's nice that you're really passionate about it. But, let's think about it for a second, because either we set via class, okay, where in 4 different classrooms, there's 4 different levels of children, right? And then within that set, I still group my children based on how well I think they're doing day to day. I might move children around and be like, okay, you guys are cracking on today. Well done. These guys need a bit more support. So I'm still doing that. Okay, now flip to a mixed ability classroom. You just have that in a microcosm of a classroom. You've got 4 tables. And the 4 tables are the 4 sets which would exist. But instead of having a different teacher on each table this time, catering to those needs, you've got one teacher at the front who's having to balance what would be 4 classes if you set, doing 4 different things. One table's doing something completely like 2 years below where they like year expected. The other one's doing greater depth in that year group. And you're suggesting that that's always better. I find that hard to believe. Yeah,
me too. I think just that is a perfect example, because if they're set, at least they're surrounded by children that are like-minded and similar ability, right? Completely. It might actually help them not feel rubbish. But when you're sat on the table and the table next to you is doing all harder stuff every single day, I think it's more likely that you're going to look over and be like, oh, we're the lowest table. I think that's more likely than realizing we're the lowest set. I don't know. Maybe it's the same, but your point stands, which is that it's not always going to be better, though, is it? Depends how you do mixed ability. So do you think that mixed ability, to work effectively, as the research says, has to be true, pure mixed ability, as in like the children have no idea of their ability, like in the classroom, completely random seating plan?
Yeah, I didn't get that impression from the research. The impression I got was simply that you exacerbate it by setting. Like it's always going to exist, but you obviously exacerbate it by setting, which is obviously true. Like it's obviously much more. It's much easier to realize that, and also it gives it puts a ceiling on the children to move around in the class and be able to do something, right? So if someone's on the oblong table and they usually do the lower stuff, but it's a lesson that they really get this time, and they can move on to the same sheets as the triangle table, right? That is harder to implement in a setting. Like you can still do it if you're a good teacher and you put lots of time in, but it's harder to achieve that. And that fluidity that we talked about, you have to have fluidity if you're doing setting. Well, that fluidity just kind of exists every day in a mixed ability. So I don't want anyone to think that we're sat here going mixed ability is obviously bad. No. I think all we're trying to say here is like in defense of still sometimes setting, because I think there's going to be pros and cons. Okay, let's move on to talk about differentiation then. Yeah. Anyone who hasn't worked in a school before is probably thinking, what on earth is differentiation you've been talking about? And the point is, the overall goal for a child in any year group is that they access that year group's curriculum. Okay. And I think as educators and as non-educators as well, we can accept that children are not going to be able to access something in the curriculum at the same level, at the same ability as other children. That's exactly what this whole conversation's been about. So if you're doing a lesson on, let's just say it's column addition, how to add together two numbers, and you're in now, okay, we're in this mixed ability setting, okay? Differentiation would be the difference between what you expect one child and another to be doing in that lesson. So if you walk into a classroom
for them.
Yeah, exactly. If you walked into a classroom of 32 children and every single child was doing the exact same task with the exact same amount of support, it would be a bit odd.
And same expectation.
Exactly.
So exactly that.
We're stepping into the mixed ability classroom now. We're not setting, because setting kind of differentiates for you, the problem being it's predetermined, but it does differentiate for you. If you set 4 ways, you're already differentiating 4 ways because you're getting 4 different curriculums almost that are meeting the needs of the children. You're in a mixed ability classroom now. It's weird that we have all this positivity about mixed ability and stuff, but then we have to sit down and be like, oh, by the way, you do need to plan 4 different things though, because we now are going to accept that there are obviously different children at different levels.
Well, I think that's that kind of mindset has also gone out of the window a bit, hasn't it, recently? Because it very much used to be when we started our careers. I remember it because it was drilled into us, like properly drilled. Like we'd literally get pulled up if our lessons didn't do this. It was always, every lesson we taught had to have 3 different tasks. And some of you teachers might be thinking, oh my God, yeah, it's either still the same for me or I remember that very well. And it was, you need
orange,
a low
green,
ability,
and blue.
Yep, orange, green, and blue, or whatever it was. You need a low ability task, you need a middle ability task, and you need a higher ability task. It all needs to be around the same objective because we're inclusive and it's a mixed ability class, but give them different things to suit their ability. And it did the exact same thing that setting does, just in a worse way, in my opinion, because you're just, as you're now one teacher trying to do 3 things rather than 3 teachers doing 1 thing each. And yeah, so you'd go around the class, and I actually remember watching a lesson once. It was one of the first lessons I ever watched, like, as a sort of trainee teacher. And I genuinely remember thinking, oh, this is like making me feel a bit embarrassed, because the teacher was going around and going, right, you get this task. Oh, no, you don't get that one. You got the harder one. You get that task. You've got that one. And just going around handing out the differentiated sheets to the kids. And I was thinking, doesn't that make that kid feel really dumb now? Because you just gave the one next to them the hard one, and they can see that they've got the one where they have to draw a circle and they've got to write an essay. Like, are they not going to realise that? So it's, it always comes back to that same mentality, the mental health thing with the children. But yeah, the 3 tasks, man, I think it's gone out the window a bit more, and I think rightfully so. Schools and education in general have realised that. Try to get the kids doing the same task, but differentiate by the support that you give them. Maybe one child just gets a support sheet that guides their thinking a bit more.
And gets not as far into the lesson and the objective.
You plan that, like a variation in your lesson, right? Where it starts maybe at a lower level.
Everyone starts off at a level where they're simply, demonstrating that they can meet the objective. Like that's where we kind of start. If children still aren't meeting the objective, maybe they'll carry on with some practice. If children do meet the objective, maybe they'll move on to a bit of problem solving based on what they've learned, and they can apply it in a certain way. And then the other children who were practicing, maybe at the end will do a bit of problem solving with you. But you're kind of doing the same thing, and you change it. For anyone who's not sure what we're talking about here in terms of 3 tasks, let's say we were talking about again. Let's just say it's addition. So the 3 tasks might be task A. Is just adding 2 numbers together. There's no exchanging. They've just got to lay out the columns. And maybe the columns are already laid out for them. So all they've got to do is simply add up the 1s, add up the 10s. The next one might be they've got to set it up themselves and then do the addition. And the third one might be some addition in some word problems where they've got to read like a paragraph and work out what the question is. That's what we're talking about. And it used to be you'd walk into a room, and I remember this. You'd say, okay, these 2 tables, you're going to start on B. Don't worry about A. Just go straight to B. These tables in the middle, everyone else, you're going to start at A, and this table, you're going to do A with me. And like you'd still have that bit of support and stuff.
Like Maths on Target books was classic.
Yeah, exactly. Maths on Target.
Three tasks in each page. Yeah.
Well, and what was happening, and this kind of backs up the people who are for mixed ability classes, it shows that they're not just blindly for any mixed ability, because those same people are saying that's also unacceptable. We can't set because we're putting a ceiling on children, but also we can't do this in a mixed ability class because that's also putting a ceiling on children. So
and it has the same mental effect.
Yeah, it's the same mental effect. And I think, anyone blindly could blindly read the research. And this is where I've always had a problem with it. And simply see, okay, research says mixed ability better than sets. Cool, we're going to do mixed ability. And then kind of not go any further than that. So
or not do it effectively.
Yeah, not do it effectively. Exactly that. So in a class then, Hayden, we're in mixed ability now because we're thinking, okay, it's cool. You talked about differentiation by outcome. Could you just maybe expand a bit on what you mean by differentiation by outcome and how that's more of a trendy term at the minute? And how else might you differentiate? Like, where would you sit the children? Would the seating plan be different? What do you think?
Firstly, differentiation by outcome, anyone that's not in that world, is literally, as it sounds, it's you as a teacher just having a different expectation for how much the children achieve. Not being like, everyone must get to question 10 before break or you miss your break. That's a really sort of outdated and not very inclusive way of teaching. It's more like you've designed your task in intelligent design with the tasks, which is something we talk about a lot in maths, so that actually, some children can go further and deeper into that understanding. They're all doing the same task, but the outcome is different. I might only expect some children, they can go further if they want, but I might only expect them to get to a certain level and then maybe require some support. So other ways to differentiate, and which basically just means to support children in meeting the objectives, like Dylan said, is with the use of adults. Obviously, if you're lucky enough to have a teaching assistant or any adult really in your classroom that can support you, it might be that they work with a child or a group of children. It might be that they, which is quite common and trendy now, they sort of do the actual floating around the class and you go and work with a table of children. Because a lot of people say, it was very frowned upon, wasn't it, years ago, that why is the TA always left with working with the lowest four ability children in the classroom when you're the trained teacher? You go and work with the lowest four abilities children, and the TA can go around and helicopter and help other people out, which I fully agree with, by the way. So that's another one, differentiation with support. And, obviously that falls down, doesn't it, at some point? Differentiation by support. Pretty obvious. We talk about it all the time. Go on, Dylan. Where does it fall down?
This is the problem. I think for mixed ability classes to work, I truly think that we have to have support in the classroom and there's not enough funding. So if you look at cross-section, let's say there's 4 English sets in the school that I work with, and we have 2 adult support. So, there's a rota, they're in some days, they're not in other days. I would go as far to say that it is truly impossible to fully maximize mixed ability classes and learning without a form of adult support in there to help you. And I think the perfect way where we're really blind as a profession, where we can see it in front of our eyes and we just pretend it's not a problem, is when we teach anything other than English and maths. So in English and maths, most schools will set, they'll get an extra teacher in the morning, a set teacher, which, by the way, means that classes are a bit smaller. So, instead of having 32 children in your class, for maths and English, you might have anything from 18 up to 20, 24. Let's just say.
Another form of differentiation, isn't it? By
exactly,
size.
Another form of differentiation, your ratio between adults and children. But we're very clear that, that is absolutely needed for children to make good progress. Whether you set or not is the ability to have smaller classes and have more adults. So the ratio for adults to children is much smaller than if it was just you in your class. Then I don't know what happens over lunchtime, but as a profession, we seem to have collective amnesia because we just forget that that's really important. And then the afternoon comes around, you're not in sets anymore. You're back to your class of 32 children. You've got no adult support whatsoever because there's no budget for that. So we don't have a TA at all in the afternoon helping in class. You've got 32 kids and you need to build a geodesic structure out of sticks, by the way, in DT.
Oh, and it's 2 hours.
What?
Have fun.
What? Excuse me? Yeah. And I think, therein lies the problem. If we're going to be idealistic about this, you need to enter the real world, because idealism works fantastic when there's no restraint on budget. And I don't even mean no restraint on budget, to be honest with you. I mean having a TA during the whole day. Can you imagine, Hayden, how much better do you think your practice would be for your children and in general if you as a teacher had an assistant teacher with you all day? You worked together as a 2, and it was your job to get through the class.
So much better. For exactly what you just said, the afternoons. I think on average, in my 10 years of teaching, I'd say on average per class, I have between 3 and 7 children in my class, so when it's back to that mixed ability in the afternoon, that require support to meet the basic needs of the curriculum. And I'm talking, they literally need an adult with them, or at least a lot of time spent with them in that lesson, disproportionate amount of time for them to achieve the most basic level of that curriculum. And yet, like you said, it's very common to not have one. We just seem to forget that for mixed abilities to work, we need those things in place. Yeah, it's impossible. Yeah. If I had a TA, it'd be great. If I had a TA, you have a great bond. If you had like one person working with you all day, obviously there is the chance that maybe you don't have a great bond and then you're stuck with someone who you don't work well with. But generally,
that's part of a job, isn't it? That's just,
you're going to get on with, you're going to make the effort to get on with someone. And yeah, it's going to be more beneficial in the afternoon. And maybe you could do more mixed ability stuff in the mornings. Like we've got a hybrid approach, haven't we? We've mentioned it. I don't think we've ever really summarized it, but we've got very much a hybrid approach. We try to do mixed ability as much as possible in English and maths. We find it easier to do in English for the reasons we discussed earlier. So generally, we are just completely mixed ability in English. And in maths, we have a bit of a hybrid approach. We generally take out our top 32 children and then mix the rest. And if absolutely necessary, we'll make another set based on the children's data. But if we had more adults, we might not even need to do that. That just might not be a thing, and we can fully embrace what the research says. But yeah, big theme of today. Reality sometimes is very different to the idealism that comes from research. And the research might be great and not even void in any way. It just might not work for your school. It might not be realistic. That's the way I see it. And I've found over the years that it hasn't worked. And I've got better outcomes and happier children, I think, in doing it maybe in a slightly different way to what the research says.
You're going to be very, I think a lot of people will be not shocked, but I do think the consensus right now is to not set. So this will be a very interesting episode to get everyone's thoughts on it, because I've spoken to some people on Instagram this morning when I put a post out who've said, and I specifically asked them when they mentioned that a couple of people mentioned they'd done both. And I specifically said to them, what did you find worked better? And they said staying in class worked better, for a number of reasons. Like we spoke recently, flipping the switch again now, I suppose. We worked recently with someone who came in and helped us with our spelling in school, because spelling's poor. So we had some staff training on spelling and what we can do to help the children. And I mentioned this because, again, it was a very good training session. I feel like I got a lot out of it. But again, as soon as I thought, okay, how am I going to apply this to my class? The idealism quickly turned into realism of, okay, this is all cool. And these are some fantastic games for prefixes. And I love the grid game where we can write words and find them. But my kids can't spell who. So, giving them a grid of 9 letters and saying find as many words as possible isn't actually going to help them spell words better. And I've got this spectrum in my class of children who do a million different ways of spelling wrong. Some of them do prefixes, some of them do sight words, some of them do phonics. And I don't actually know how to help them properly as one person stood in front of them. And you didn't really get an answer for it. And I think that's one of the biggest downfalls, like you said, with a mixed ability setting, is it doesn't really answer that question. And the people were saying it was better, though, when they stayed in class. And I suppose maybe then throughout the day, your children better because you're not getting children from different classes, just for maths, just for English. But I don't think it's the be all and end all.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I reckon it would maybe be slightly easier to manage the million different ways that your children are spelling things wrong if we attempted to group them 4 ways into these kids are generally getting these spelling rules wrong, or they're at this level of that spelling journey. And they're going to have real targeted support on that, rather than you trying to do 4 levels of targeted support in the same time in a lesson without wasting anyone's time. Very, very, very hard to do. Can I leave this conversation, because I know time's getting on, with just one example of where streaming has worked for me. Just a real life example from last year or a couple of years ago, I can't remember now. But I was just thinking of this child came to mind when I was talking earlier. And we were in maths, and in this particular cohort, we had one set that we pulled out for basically the top sort of 32 children, because our data was really interesting. It was very split, and we had a lot of children working at a really high level and quite a big gap, and a lot of children working sort of near expected. And we were like, okay, that's interesting. Let's target those children separately and these children separately. So we had 2 sets basically across the year. We had 4 teachers, so we mixed it like that. And there was one child that I was teaching in my set, and I had the higher set at this point, because I've done multiple sets across the years. And I noticed from my teacher assessment of them in general that they were generally struggling to keep up with the rest of the class because of the lack of sort of foundational skills. There had a lot of gaps earlier on that were quite hard to plug with the content and pace we were going at in that particular set. But obviously I tried really hard to do that for that child. And then we did a second set of tests, and everyone made progress apart from this child. And at that point I was like, if this is where fluidity of sets comes in really handy. And I had a conversation with this child and another teacher, and they wanted to go to a different class, not because it was a lower set. We never used the language of this is a lower set. It's just, in this set, you struggle with these things quite a bit, and obviously we try and help you. They're doing loads of that in this class. Do you want to go and join them? They're like, oh, yes, please. Went to this other class, generally way happier now, because I actually think looking back on reflection, they were maybe getting a bit stressed in my class because we were working at a different pace. Much, much happier in the other class. Ended up making loads of progress then after that. And I don't know, I thought that was a good example of where streaming can be done right, but so easily shows how it could be done completely wrong, which is where the research is totally right. If I didn't recognize that child needed to move, they might have just been stagnating in that class, getting stressed, maybe not making as much progress as they could. So it was like an example of both ends of the world. I think it can be done correctly. I think it can be done very poorly as well. But you do have to react to the needs and ability of the children. If you don't do it that way and you just have blanket sets that they all just get put in, that's where it goes completely wrong, in my opinion. So anyway.
No, absolutely.
Bit controversial.
Absolutely. No, I think it's very interesting. And I think, there's enough people who still set. There's enough people, right, who go as far as they can. They do mixed. And then at the last hurdle, they're like, oh, let's just set. And it's because I think we know deep down that we can target children in a different way when we set. And also for me, they get a bit older in secondary school, they get set immediately. I think it can be done right. I think a big burden on our shoulders to make sure that children aren't feeling bad about it. I think that's something that is, like you said, has to be at the forefront of anyone's mind if you're going to go down this road of setting and not letting anyone stay behind. But that's part of the job. You don't let anyone get left behind anyway, do you? Like that, we're not gonna actively let children get left behind. And if it's not working, be reactive. And like I said, I think not having a predetermined, this is what we do in this school, whether or not the children do well or whatever, whether it's good or not. No, we do this because we're this school.
React to the children, put things in place for them. That's it. Simple as.
Yeah, right, definitely. Guys, we finished an episode with no cuts. We're going to finish right there because we've blabbered on, haven't we? Anything else you wanted to say before we finished, Hayden?
Well, just off topic, to be fair. I'm sure we could talk about that all day, but didn't you have a little plug for our Instagram stories to send in for us?
Yeah. So firstly, I wanted just to mention, we were talking, I did an Instagram post the other day, a quick poll, which was, poll, am I saying that right? Poll?
I think it's poll.
Poll. I did a poll, and it was just basically asking what people, what setting they work in, because we get a whole range of people following us on Instagram, closing in on 3,000 followers now. And I wanted just to know, who are they? Is it no or no? I don't know. Anyway, so 73% of our followers work in a primary school, as expected, but probably a bit lower than I thought, maybe, because we're obviously, very much centered on primary school. 14% work in secondary school. 8% don't work in either of those, but still work in education. And 5% don't work in education whatsoever. They just follow us for the laughs. Maybe they're our mates or just some random people who've come along for the ride. But I got a message of someone, because quite a few of the people who said neither but in education messaged to say what they do, essentially. And someone messaged in and they were just talking about their provision. And they give SEN provision for people 16 and over. And I was like, that's really, because, you hear a lot about them kind of, going off the edge of a cliff in terms of the support given to them. It's like, you get there, bye. Okay. So there are amazing people doing work. And it really piqued my interest, because they were talking about the kind of things they planned for them. And it's this whole debate about how, formal education should be in general, because I think in these settings, it's very normal to not sit and do, we're going to do geometry. Then afterwards, we're going to do the chemical reactions of the bonds. That's not what these people need, because they also have a bunch of people who maybe have been excluded from school, and they kind of take them in before they're even 16. So they were just explaining these things they have in place for them. Across the next term, they're going to be doing things like how to, properly wire plug sockets. They live on their schools on a farmyard where they can go and see the winery and stuff like that. Look, it was just all of this amazing, like, real life stuff. And I was just thinking, we miss a trick, don't we? And what I found was lovely speaking to this person, because it broadens your horizons. I think we can get stuck, can't we, Hayden, sometimes in where you go to primary school, maths, English, science, maths, English, geography. And it's that wider thing we talked about earlier of, okay, all of these things we've been talking about, realistically, this is all for academic attainment. This is all for, results at the end of the day. What's our job, really? Really, Hayden, what would you say our job is, really?
Just get kids ready to be grown-ups.
That's it. And then
to live in society.
What this person was doing was fantastic. So do guys get in touch with us on Teach, Sleep, Repeat podcast. Let us know what you do, and also let us know if you disagree or agree with anything, or what you want to hear in the future. Because
it's a bit
I want to hear all about it.
We normally, we normally generally go with the sort of general consensus and research, but I do feel like I disagree with it a little bit today. Hopefully, my points came across clearly. I hope you don't think that I just think setting is better. That's not the way.
Not at all. I didn't get that impression.
Definitely a hybrid element to that. We missed out a few topics. Maybe we'll talk about in future, though. We didn't really talk about specific types of differentiation, like differentiation for children with special educational needs, or English as an additional language. But maybe we can catch up with that.
I know you feel poorly, Hayden. Before we're going for over an hour, Hayden started this podcast off by saying, "Can we just do a shorter one today? I don't feel great."
Yeah. That's me. And then actually, I probably spoke for about 80% of that. So
that was nice. I rest my vocal cords.
How the tables have turned.
I'm going to finish off with one little funny story. I got a message from, I got a message from an ECT who is catching up with the podcast. Been listening, a bit behind, but nearly caught up now. She thought she'd say hello. And she just asked about a recent thing we mentioned on a podcast, that game where we fill in the gaps. So we fill in the gaps of a story. And it was called Ad Libs, I think, wasn't it? Where, you say to the children, give me a noun, give me a proper noun, give me a conjunction, and you practice GPS. We're chatting about that, and she just finished off with a little story. And I'll leave you with this story, Hayden, because it made me laugh. She was in a year 2 class, and one of the children, she'd shared that she'd met her uncle's new girlfriend. And her uncle's new girlfriend was from China. So that was fascinating for her, asking her all about that, finding out more about, her new uncle's girlfriend. How brilliant. So this girl came into school in year 2. And from then on, declared to everyone that she's now Chinese, and proceeded to spend the rest of the year answering the afternoon register in Chinese. So from now on, she is Chinese.
I love that. Kids' minds, man, are so good. It's like, what do you mean? What do you mean that's not how it works? Of course it is. I'm Chinese now. Chinese. It's like you at the start of this episode, starting in Spanish or whatever you did.
I don't know what you mean. I think you're still hallucinating, mate. I think you're still hallucinating.
I've lost it. I think I need to go back to bed, to be honest with you. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Well, if you've got any stories, please do write in. No, Dylan. Yeah. No. You've done it again. Right, listen. I'm sorry. I have to go off. This is normal. I'd edit this normally. I'm fed up of this. No. If you've got any stories, guys, please do write them in. We'd love to revitalise our little stories from the classroom segment. But we need stories to tell for that. So, if you've got anything funny, let us know.
Slight problem, Hayden.
Oh,
slight problem.
What?
Only 3 people actually get this far in the podcast ever. So you're talking to your mum now.
We need to do it at the start. Yeah. All right. Well, see you later, Mum.
Bye, Rishi.
Yeah. What's for dinner tonight? Oh, we'll talk about it later. All right, guys. See ya.